started with a bit of outrage, but then it picked on. It became a huge issue about, discriminatory behavior by a dignitary who's visiting the Indian soil, and could Indian authorities a day later said that they had nothing to do with this, and this was completely organized by the Afghan authorities, and they would be knowing what went. The behavior was very normal. There were no markers, there were no conditions, there was no dress code implied in the invite that was sent out. But I
Right.
think it's by instinct, it's by default that everybody dressed in a certain way, but nobody was wearing hijabs or covering their head. There was no such debarred or restriction, and everybody was let in, whoever was there. It was a technical issue, and there was no intention, there was no other problem in terms of excluding women out of the Friday meet.
The recent press meet by the visiting foreign minister of Taliban, Amir Khan Muttaqi, started a raging controversies concerning women rights in India. Some women journalists who were there at the press conference were refused to get inside the Afghanistan embassy. It created a furor. In fact, even the opposition leaders came out and tweeted about it. The debate centered around Nari Shakti. I'm joined by my colleague Divya, who covers the Ministry of External Affairs for Indian Express. Thank you, Divya. What I would like to know from you first is, were you there when these women journalists were denied that same day on Saturday, I believe?
No, on Friday was the first time that the visiting foreign minister of Afghanistan held a press meet and called some journalists.
Hmm.
Uh, but as it were, there were the to the group to whom the invites were sent, as it were, there were no women.
Hmm.
Uh, and some women who later found out that the foreign minister is calling a press interaction and meeting journalists to talk about his discussions with the Indian foreign minister and Indian delegation. They tried to get to the embassy, and as we got to know that some of them were denied entry. So basically they were told that your name is on the not on the list and you cannot enter, is what some of our colleagues are telling us. But then, when the photos and the word spread later in the evening on Friday, which is the day after Mutaki landed in India for his week-long visit, it created a little bit of outrage. It started with a bit of outrage, but then it picked on. It became a huge issue about discriminatory behavior by a dignitary who's visiting the Indian soil and could do this on the Indian soil, even though the area is considered Afghan territory, the country's territory that it belongs to. But still, that kind of behavior on Indian soil was not taken kindly. After journalists took to it and posted about it on social media and spoke to the authorities here as well, and to the Afghan embassy officials, who said that Indian authorities a day later said that they had nothing to do with this, and this was completely organized by the Afghan authorities, and they would be knowing what went. And but still it refused to die down, so much so that opposition leaders took to it and questioned government on Nari Shakti and women empowerment at a time when India is taking up the women's reservation bill, and it's the main plank and main narrative which is going on. And then they questioned that how could the government allow something like this to happen. But we don't know what happened eventually, but it started to be taken very seriously, not viewed in a good light. And
Hmm.
on Sunday, suddenly, then when the visiting Afghan minister was supposed to make a trip to Taj Mahal in Agra, that trip was suddenly called off, and a range of journalists, including women this time, got invites from the embassy officials saying that you are cordially invited for the press meet with Motaki at 2 p.m. And that is how one presumes that things took a turn, and there was some kind of course correction that happened eventually. Yeah.
I believe you were also there on Sunday when this press conference was called. Please describe to us as to how many women there. About 100 journalists were there, and what I read about it in the newspapers, about 60% of them were women. So, can you please describe to us as to when you landed at the Afghanistan embassy? From there till inside, what happened? How many checks? What was the mood like of women journalists whom you spoke to?
See, the mood was completely opposite of what was described from Friday evening's proceedings when women were turned away. Conference room where the press conference was supposed to be held, and the room, which is roughly, as you said, about 100 journalists, including the camera people, would have at least 40 to 50% women, and I think it just happened out of instinct, and nobody said anything, but women occupied the front rows, um, maybe to kind of make a mark and makes themselves visible that in India, if you are visiting, you have to, kind of deal
Absolutely.
with women journalists, and you cannot avoid one section of the fraternity. Yeah.
And what was the behavior of Afghanistani officials? Like on Friday, as you mentioned, that some of the women journalists who adhered to the norms and they were dressed accordingly also to visit the Afghanistani embassy. But despite that, they were stopped. So yesterday, that is on Sunday. So what was the behavior of Afghanistani officials with women journalists? Can you please describe that to us?
See, the behavior was very normal. There were no markers, there were no conditions, there was no dress code implied in the invite that was sent out. But I
Hmm.
think it's by instinct, it's by default that everybody dressed in a certain way, but nobody was wearing hijabs or covering their head. There was no such debarred or restriction, and everybody was let in, whoever was there, and women were very prominently seated in the front three rows, and nobody flinched about it.
Okay.
It was as normal, I would say, as it would have been. Of course,
Hmm.
this was made with a this entire effort was with a view to make a point that this is normal, and what happened on Friday was just incidental, even though that may not be the case, but at least it was made to look very normal and regular as it should be, and there were no issues, so to speak.
When when
And
when
I
women
think,
journalists Yeah, when women journalists must have raised this issue with the officials who addressed the press conference. So, what was the response of those officials? What explanation did they give you?
see, when the foreign minister, no less than the Afghan foreign minister, was asked this directly once he opened the floor to questions after his initial statements about his bilateral talks with the Indian side and other things that are happening with India. Um, he this was the first question that almost everyone wanted to ask and asked, and most of the women were asking these questions. And then they clearly said that it was a technical issue and there was no intention, there was no other problem, in terms of excluding women out of the Friday meet. But yeah, they did not say that, any of this was intentional. They clarified that this was just a technical issue based on a short list that they got, and that is how they invited people 2 days earlier. And today they have
Who
invited
clears these?
everyone.
Who clears these lists? When you people get invites from these foreign embassies. So, I'm sure some kind of diplomatic channel must be involved in it. So, who clears these lists? Matlab, is this the Indian government officials also help the Pakistani officials? Their own have the list, which
No, it's it's generally the embassy concerned. When they invite us, then they vet the list, they clear the list, and invites are sent accordingly. But as they would know that you cover foreign policy and you are MEA beat correspondents, so maybe it works according to them. Or if you kind of have been covering some other subjects that deal with the embassy directly. But I think the embassy itself will vet the list. It doesn't come from an Indian side, so to speak. They may seek help from Indian side, if they want to know the names or something. But it's not the Indian side that on its own would be giving out any names of who to invite or who not to invite. This is clearly the mission concerned. It's their prerogative. It is their staff who kind of make the list and send out invites accordingly.
are
Yeah.
there any women officials also in Afghanistan embassy? I'm just curious.
Unfortunately not. We didn't see any women. And in fact, the after the Taliban regime has taken over, the strength of the embassy has also gone down. Now there is just one diplomat there who's based in Bombay, and there are about 20-25 staffers who take care of other administrative and financial and visa functions. So the strength of embassy is really low, but no, we didn't find any woman there. Yeah.
And what about back home in Afghanistan? Because these issues were also raised with Mr. Mutaki. So, what did he have to say about education, about rights of women in Afghanistan?
At a press interaction, which was generally, which looked like it was, set up to course correct the view
Hmm.
on gender discrimination. This was an obvious question which was asked, and it was mostly the women asking these questions about the state of women back home in Afghanistan, in the Taliban regime, and how girls and women are not allowed to schools and to other, places where which should happen naturally, which was happening in Afghanistan earlier. So he took those questions. The visiting foreign minister and his delegation took those questions. They did not flinch about any questions, but however, they also said that there are about 10 million. Of those students who are going to getting education in Afghanistan, and out of which they said there are about 2.8 million girls and women. Although the education comes in Afghanistan is quite restricted for women as of now. They're not allowed in schools. I think it is some limited kind of schools or um, madrasas or something that they would be allowed at, but they're not allowed in all schools. So there are restrictions. But he said that their focus right now is on maintaining peace, law and order, and the women have not been barred, so to speak. It's not been considered, declared. The word he used was religiously haram. He said that it's been postponed for now, and they will take these issues up maybe a little later.
See, since you cover MEA, you were also there for the press conference also. Can you please shortly tell us what were the three takeaways from the visit of Taliban foreign minister to India?
See, besides this major, event that we were talking about at the press conference and the women issue, I think it also made a point that if Taliban regime has to, interact with the world as, those who represent Afghanistan, they have to deal with women. And I think India women in India made their point fairly well. I think the point was carried home that you can't ignore half the world's population if you have to be the
Absolutely.
representing your country to the world, whether tomorrow you're dealing with Europe or you're going to the United Nations or different multilateral
Absolutely.
forums or dealing with other heads of state. So I
Hmm.
think that fair point has been made. Maybe that changes. It's a beginning of a change back home. Maybe, one would only hope as a woman. But otherwise, there were a lot of discussions about, the Pakistan, the situation that Afghanistan is having with Pakistan right now, and from the Indian soil, they said that uh, while people in Pakistan may be peace loving, and maybe sections of political leadership also, but they said that there are some who don't want peace. Maybe they were hinting at the some sections in the army, and they said that if they would like to talk through dialogue and discussion, and they want peace. That is what Afghanistani minister emphasized during the interaction, and then if Pakistani side doesn't agree to it through peaceful means, then they would exercise other options. So this kind of statement coming for Islamabad from New Delhi was significant in many ways, and then they also condemned Pahalgam a day earlier after their delegation level talks with the Indian foreign minister. While all this is happening, there is also opening up of people to people ties, even though India doesn't recognize the Taliban government, so to speak. But diplomatically, it has been uh, recognized. The mission has been recognized now. So the visa functions and everything will come into play. Visas for students, visas for businessmen, trade is something that was discussed. The flights will resume, direct flights, as Mutaki's delegation announced, from New Delhi to Kabul, and also cargo flights from Bombay to Kandahar, Delhi to Kandahar, and all those places. So there is a whole new people to people kind of contact that has been established through this visit, besides of course making a point to our neighbor. Yeah.
And lastly, what I would like to know from you is, we have heard the official version of the Ministry of External Affairs, but when this diktat, or when this was noticed by even Indian authorities, did officials also raise an eyebrow, or it was just a work in a day for them also, as far as ME is concerned?
See, their official statement said that they have nothing to
Yeah,
do with
that
it.
we
It
know,
is
that we know, that we know.
yeah, yeah.
Apart
but but
when we
but
were
we
speaking to them off record, yeah. Hmm.
but we get a sense that they would have had some kind of word with them. They would have leaned in on them to kind of course
Hmm.
correct this, because yesterday, as we know, the
Yeah.
visiting minister was supposed to go to Agra and spend about 2 hours at Taj Mahal, which was cancelled at the last minute, even though journalists had already queued up at Taj Mahal to meet him.
Hmm.
It was cancelled very last minute, and last minute this press conference happened. I think the narrative that was getting out, I think the word was getting out, was kind of damaging. And it's only a guess that maybe the Indian side kind of leaned in on them and made them correct this, and yeah, for good
Yeah.
maybe.
Thank you, Divya, for explaining to us that there was obviously a friction between as far as diplomacy and also, this principles of, our women empowerment as far as India is concerned. Thank you so much for explaining the entire issue to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.